Okay, we're all here.
But that trading team showed up last night.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm Jack Frost, Chairperson of the Metropolitan Utilities District Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome you all to the committee meetings this morning, February 2nd, 2022. This meeting is being live streamed from the boardroom at the M.U.D headquarters building located at 7350 World Communications Drive, and a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the M.U.D website after the meeting's conclusion. I would like to announce that due to COVID, we're limiting the number of attendees at today's meeting to the extent possible. Unvaccinated people are required to wear masks, and all attendees are encouraged to abide by the 6-foot social distancing rule. In the interest of protecting the health and safety of any members of the public who wish to address the board, they may do so from an adjacent conference room. Thank you for your cooperation in this regard. Safety briefing. I'd like to invite our Vice President of Safety and Security, Shane Hunter, to provide a briefing regarding protocol for all individuals in attendance at the board meeting today in the event of an emergency.
Good morning, Shane Hunter, Vice President of Safety and Security. The boardroom is located on the first floor here at headquarters, and the main entrance is at the rear of the space where we all entered this morning. An alternate exit is located over here. It's also behind this door in this hallway we'll find the nearest fire extinguisher, first aid kit, and the AED. With the location of the AED in mind, should there be a medical emergency in this space during the meeting, 911 will be contacted by the security desk, and they will escort emergency personnel into this room. Should we need to evacuate this space for any reason, we'll also go through the same door, take 2 lefts, and reconvene in the parking garage for accountability. That concludes the safety briefing.
Roll call.
Bagley?
Here.
Cook?
Here.
Friend?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
McGowan?
Here.
Howard?
Here.
Kavanaugh?
Here. I would like to advise all those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available on the wall in the back of the boardroom, and a copy is also available in a nearby conference room set aside for members of the public who may attend. 4, recognition of outgoing Board of Directors Chairperson. At this time, my fellow board members and I would like to recognize our outgoing Chairperson, Mike McGowan. As you are all aware, last month Director McGowan participated remotely and we were unable to present the plaque to him personally at that time. Director McGowan, we appreciate your experience, knowledge, and leadership this past year, especially while navigating through the challenges of the pandemic. I will ask Vice Chairperson Tanya Cook to please present the plaque to you. Director McGowan, please accept this plaque as a thank you on behalf of your colleagues on the board, management, employees, and our customer owners. Congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you, Jack. It was really a fun year to spend with this board, meeting a lot of challenges, but I love working with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Okay, construction and operations.
Before we get started, Director Frost, Chairperson Frost, Mark Doyle, President, this is a special day, and I don't mean to steal the thunder of the plaque, and nice work, Mike. We enjoyed working with you. But today is 2/2/22, correct?
Yeah.
20, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And it just happens to be Jack's birthday, Jack Frost's birthday. And he told me that I could mention this. You know, you can't be too careful these days, but with Jack, I feel like I can take a little liberty here. Anyway, Jack turns 90 today.
Amazing.
And
Amazing.
Jack saw his shadow earlier today, so we got 6 more weeks of frost.
that's it. That's awesome. You know, that was spectacular. I think I better just stop. I don't think I can top that. But I do want to wish Jack a happy birthday. I've been working with Jack for over 30 years now.
Yeah.
As part of M.U.D.
17 years on the board plus the time you've had here.
Yep. So just it's a pleasure that we start your first full meeting as chair with your birthday, and I'm glad you let me mention it. So happy birthday and many,
Thank you.
many more, and we should all be so fortunate and healthy as we get to that point if we do.
Thank you. I'm the oldest employee at the M.U.D. by far.
Yep. And probably the second oldest elected official in the state, but I'll just stop there.
To his dad by 1 year.
Yeah, he'll like reading that I said that. So, thank you.
Okay. Construction and operations. It's my understanding that Vice President of Water Operations, Mike Koenig, will be presenting the capital expenditures this morning in place of Senior Vice President and Chief Operations Officer Gina Langle. Mr. Koenig, you may proceed.
Hey, Mike, before we get started, I just want to make sure that everybody that comes up to the podium speak loudly and clearly, because last month's meeting, I was notified by a few people that there were issues hearing folks presenting from the podium. So just going forward today and every meeting. Thanks, Mike.
Very good. Thank you, Director Bigley. Mike Koenig, Vice President of Water Operations. Good morning. Happy Groundhog's Day. Behind tab number 5 in your binder, there's a letter for the capital expenditures, which includes 5 system improvements and 2 buildings, plants, and equipment requests as well. I'd like to highlight 2 of the system improvement projects and 1 of the building and plants projects as well. Right out of the gate, you'll see the WP 1881, which is the installation of 16-inch taps on a 54-inch and a 48-inch. This is a concrete pipeline or transmission line. These are tapping saddles that will be between Field Club and Edna Pump Station. This work is needed to facilitate the condition assessment of approximately 6.5 miles of 54-inch pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe, or PCCP, concrete pipe for short. The line is from 36 and Edna to the Field Club Reservoir. This will utilize a tool. This is a pipe diver free swimming tool that will evaluate the pipe and give us an inspection of the main. The tool needs, however, insertion and extraction points for it to accomplish its mission. It's expected that we'll bring the authorization for that project to the March board. So this kind of gets us out of the gates. We'll get those insertion and extraction points done early, and then we'll be able to follow up with the actual project itself of evaluating the main. So that inspection is scheduled for late spring of 2022, pending board approval. The next system improvements project that I'd like to highlight is some professional engineering services to design approximately 14,300 feet of 16-inch and 9,500 feet of 24-inch ductile iron main along Platte View Road from Hidden Valley Drive to South 23rd Avenue along Hidden Valley Drive from Platte View Road to South 10th Street along South 10th from Hidden Valley Drive to Platte Road, all along Platte Road and Highway 75 to Harlan Lewis Road, and along Harlan Lewis Road from Platte Road to the north of Papillion Creek, all in Bellevue. This authorization for professional engineering services for water mains from 36 and Platte View Road to Harlan Lewis Road, north of Papillion Creek. The City of Bellevue will perform the work as the developer and is undertaking this project to attract industrial users and promote development in the area. The City of Bellevue will be responsible for all costs associated with this project. The professional engineer is needed to provide the design phase services for these water transmission mains and will serve in areas in southeastern Bellevue, including the city's LB 840 Economic Development Zone. Engineering is recommending using HDR for these professional engineering services, as HDR is in a unique position to provide design services for this project because HDR was selected as the road improvement project engineer parallel, in this main will parallel that road project in Platteview Road. HDR is also designing 2 large diameter sewer force mains, which will parallel this main along its entire alignment, and preparing a conceptual design of the future force main that will follow the same corridor. Following completion of the design, the project is tentatively scheduled to be advertised for construction by the district in early 2023, with project completion around the spring of 2025. A subsequent CNA will be submitted to the board for an additional construction project after the bids are open and evaluated. This work is tentatively planned for March of 2023. Approval of this expenditure will authorize the president to enter into a professional engineering agreement with HDR for the design phase services. Last on my list to highlight our buildings, plants, and equipment project, the lime grit removal project at the Platte West plant. The Platte West plant lime feed system includes 3 RDP Technologies Incorporated, or RDP, slaker systems, which includes the RDP's original grit removal system. The term grit refers to the insolubles or the impurities that are naturally occurring in the raw limestone material used in the production and manufacture of lime. This lime is delivered to the plants and used as part of the lime softening process. The amount of grit can vary depending on the source of the limestone. And even at the best quality of lime does carry an insoluble load, which translates into several 100 pounds of grit per day. The original RDP grit removal system at Platte West was designed to remove the large grit, and RDP has since refined that system so that it now removes the large and fine grits, and keeping that fine grit from passing through the treatment process and eventually into the residuals processing. Keeping that out of there will save manpower, time, and equipment costs in the future. The Florence water treatment plant recently upgraded to include this technology, as have other utilities. The main driver of this retrofit is to keep that grit out of the final process or the residuals capture. With that, I open it up to any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mike. Good presentation. On an item that you actually didn't bring up, number 2 under building, plants, and equipment, professional design and construction inspection services to replace roofs at Skyline, Rainwood, and Walnut Hill. Mm-hmm. With regard to Walnut Hill, that's been offline for quite some time. What's the functionality of the engine building, and why would we need to have the roof looked at and replaced if there's no functionality at Walnut Hill?
You bet. I'll clarify that. The Walnut Hill system consists of a pump station and reservoir. The reservoir has been taken offline and is no longer part of the district's distribution system. However, we still utilize the pump station. Okay. And we're protecting that asset.
Thanks for that clarification.
You bet.
Thank you. That building that's up there, the pump station building, is, thank you. That building that's up there, the pump station building, I've actually been up to see that, and it's really a historic building that we need to preserve, and it's my understanding that even if we sell off the remaining land, we're going to retain that.
That is our current trajectory right now. We're in the process of a water system master plan that will evaluate the future need for that in the district system. But the trajectory that we're looking at right now will preserve that.
Good. I would really encourage that. Like I say, it's a very historic building, and it kind of reflects on our history. It only has a male restroom.
Yep, I agree, Director Howard. Thank you.
I have a question for my own edification. What is a tapping saddle method?
Right.
First, I thought you said tapping saddles.
Could you bring up the conceptual plan for the pipe diver system? I'm sorry. I'm bringing up a slide that I'm going to help reference. Sorry, Director Cook.
Even if you can just tell me like the category of
there you go.
thing. Okay.
Yeah. So you can see the advance to the next. There you go. Right there. In the system overview here, it has the location where the system will be deployed and retrieved at each end. The saddle is actually, it's just a hole in the pipe with basically a cap. And why we call it a saddle is typically part of that system envelops the entire pipe. It basically preserves the integrity of the pipe as you put it on, and then the hole is drilled into the pipe so that the access can be made. Does that clarify it?
Yes, thank you.
Director Cook, that's a great question, and Mike knows, as others, that I love this topic. So I'm going to make sure and mention it to Director Friend. We were going to meet out at Dodge Street to watch us put a tool in to analyze that main that needed to be pushed through the main. This one actually freely swims through the main, and it's going to go a long distance from the Edna Street pumping station in Bellevue all the way to the Field Club Reservoir. Correct, Mike?
Correct.
Now, the neat thing about this is, and you know we had discussion about pipe replacement versus conditional assessment. I feel confident that taking some of those funds and that capital and moving it toward this process, we're going to get to look at concrete pipes that are really a worry for us every day. This thing will swim all the way, and we'll be able to see if there are small spots that need repairing. These kind of pipes are catastrophic when they fail. And we haven't had the ability to look at them in this way because I don't think the technology was mature enough where we would adopt it. We will now. This'll, even if we find very little, we'll be getting more done than maybe X miles of pipe. So to support this and for staff to get on this and do this cool process to put holes in the pipes and let that thing swim is great. It gives me, and you, Mike, we've talked about, great optimism to really take a look at some of these pipes that we haven't been able to look at in this way. Fair?
Very fair, very fair. These are, it can't be overstated how important, when you start talking 54 and 48, how important those lines are to our system. Yeah. So, we want to get a good bill of health on those before we move on, and if need be, we'll plan accordingly if we have to come in and repair or work on those.
Mike, is there an interruption of service while this process is going on?
I'm going to say that we will have an interruption in that line, but the customer will not notice that interruption. So we will take the line out of service to provide the taps, but we're doing it in such a way in a time of the year that will not impact the customers.
Would there be any air in the line as a result of this at the end?
There's possibility that we would have to chase air out of the line. Okay. We expect that and we'll plan accordingly.
And we make sure we communicate with our customers that when they turn their water back on, that they may have some noise or rattling in the line, because a lot of times that causes a lot of consternation.
Correct, and our water D folks are very good about being cognizant of where that air is going to travel to, by the topography and catching it before it makes it to the residents. But yes.
Thank you.
Mike, we'll keep the board posted in case anyone, because this stuff's, I'm a little geeky on it, but it's kind of neat.
I am too, and I feel like I'm stealing Gina's fire here a little bit because it is coming back next month. So I kind of used some of her reference materials to help explain it here.
Only fair.
Can I just say, this reminds me when I worked at Northern Natural, we had what they called smart pigs. We'd pig the line and they'd send the pig down the line and get all the signals back about the quality of the line and any deterioration. I assume this is probably a lot more technical than we had 10 years ago. So,
very similar, Director McGowan. I mean, the data, we're looking for similarities, and of course, this pipe is, being the pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe, is a little unique to steel. It will tell us some of the data that we really need to know. And make sure that this thing's gonna last what we need it to. So
we always distinguish these were smart pigs, not dumb pigs. So.
Right. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director of Plant Engineering, Stephanie Hinn, acceptance of contracts and payment of final estimates.
Good morning. Stephanie Hand, Director of Plant Engineering. I will be addressing the finals letter this morning behind tab number 6. We have 5 finals this month, 2 water infrastructure projects, 1 professional services contract, 1 water development project, and 1 plant project. And I'd just like to touch on 2 of these projects briefly. Item D is the rehabilitation of Basins 3 at the Florence Water Treatment Plant. This is part of our ongoing Florence Capital Improvement Plan. There is a change order associated with this project for an overall deduct, but approving this final also does approve change order number 1. I'd also like to talk about item D for a moment. This was with JEO Architecture. This was for professional engineering services for the preliminary site work and platting of the new construction center, which we are now calling CC2. This included the purchasing of the initial property, which was just over 50 acres, and the adjacent property, which was approximately 4.5 acres. We purchased this property back in 2021. As you recall, the property is near State Street, and it's bordered by State Street, Blair High Road, and Irvington Road. This will bring that to fruition. This is the initial platting, preliminary platting, and then we anticipate hiring a consultant to begin the design services for CC2 here early in 2022. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Steph, just looking at the contract approval date for these 4 items, remarkably, we are either at or below what was approved for the actual bid. And knock on wood, that trend continues. But with regard to the chain supply and bid materials, do we foresee any continuing issues, or is it just kind of steady as we go and hoping for the best that the chain supply continues to untangle and improve?
Yeah, we kind of have our fingers crossed a little bit. And in my next, I'm also addressing tab number 7. You're going to hear a little bit about that. We are seeing some issues with pipe costs and with fittings costs and things like that, and we're just kind of trying to roll with it and seeing what we can do, hoping that it doesn't last too long. And I think we all have our fingers crossed that we're getting to the end here of the pandemic, and maybe it's going to get a little better.
Can I ask looks like there's a little bit of difference between C and D, and I'm trying to understand. I mean, I appreciate both of them came in at less than the contract bid, or the unit price bid was less. It looks like C is because there was less hard surface restoration, and it looks like D is because the concrete materials and labor to complete the work are less than originally estimated. So they sound like they're a little bit different, but who managed those 2 projects? Because I like the fact that they were able to bring those in at less than bid. Do you, off the top of your head, do you know who managed those?
I do.
For us, I mean.
I do. The roll-off construction one, C, that was one of our cast iron main, that's water. That was through my group. Chris Thompson is the senior plant engineer, and then he has a group of senior engineering techs that work under him, and so that was that group. And then D, McGill Restoration, that was through Mike Koenig's group at Florence and Melissa Polito out at Florence, and that was their project.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will also address tab 7, the letter behind tab 7, which is Hawkins Construction, Water Infrastructure Partner for 2022. We're asking to extend our partnership between the district and Hawkins Construction for another year. As you know, we've partnered with various water contractors as a part of our Water IR program over recent years. Last month, we brought you a recommendation for Hymas Corporation. This request is very similar. We didn't bring them at the same time because our negotiations with Hymas was farther along than it was with Hawkins, so that's why we split them up by month. Hawkins has been performing water infrastructure work for the district since 2020. They've been installing ductile iron pipe for us, and they have performed well. For 2022, we've identified a single project for Hawkins to construct, which is approximately 1.2 miles of abandonment that will happen by the end of this year. We are currently still negotiating prices with them, but their prices have increased a little bit from 2021. Some of this has to do with, like Director Bagley mentioned, pipe costs. We're seeing that a little bit. They've been putting in ductile iron for us. We're seeing some increased costs there. That's not the whole story. Pipe costs definitely do make a difference. Material makes a difference, but it's also type of project, where the project's located, how many services are on that project, how many lead services are on that project. All of that goes into the cost per mile. And so while we do recommend forging ahead with this project here in 2022, but one thing that we're doing looking into 2023 is we're going to continue to evaluate and see is it just a supply chain issue, or are the pipe prices really going up? So we're looking at, should we be putting in more plastic? Should we stick with ductile? Should we be doing more pipe bursting? We're going to be looking at all of that through 2022. And then in 2023, while we're recommending 1 year here for Hawkins, but then coming later this year, we anticipate bringing to you folks a recommendation for our various water IR contractors for the work for 2023, and we'll be using 2022 to figure out what the best economical way is to do that for each of the contractors. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions you might have.
Stephanie, I have kind of two questions. Will this be a bigger project for Hawkins this year than either one in 2021?
It's very similar. They wiggle a little bit, but it's very, very similar to what they did the last 2 years.
Okay, and then the second question, follow-up, is if this is a one-year contract and they finish this project within this year, can we give them another project? Or is it just a one-year project, one deal?
We are doing a one-year project, one deal, and we've kind of been planning that way. That's part of our goals for this year, but we're already talking to them about next year. But yes, this is going to be a single project.
But do you have a little wiggle room if they finish the project early and we have another, say, a smaller one? We could say, hey, would you ever want to take this one on since we're approving this for 1 year?
We do have a little wiggle room. We'd have to talk to Mr. Shafford if we have the money to do it.
Yeah.
So that all plays into it, the dollars and what we're trying to accomplish that year.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
And Mark Doyle, President, we also design these quite a ways ahead of time, don't we?
Yes and no. On the gas, we design a whole lot farther ahead than we do on water.
So we do have a little...
We have a little bit more wiggle room on gas than we do on water, but water, there's a lot more to the design typically. And so those are like, will be like Jeff Skovanek's folks in design, they're working on already thinking about 2023 right now.
Yeah, there's some pre-planning, but if we have the money, we can manage.
Right.
That it?
Thank you.
Thank you. 4, Vice President of Gas Operations Jim Knight will now review the proposed amendment to the LNG Capital Improvement Project contract with CHI.
Good morning. Jim Knight, Vice President of Gas Operations. You can find the letter behind tab 8. This request is to amend our LNG Capital Improvement contract with CHI Engineering for the design and construction of a hydronic heating system in the amount of $519,000. Under this amendment, a heating system will be designed and installed within the containment dike in the LNG pump area, spill trough, and spill containment structure. The heating system consists of piping embedded in concrete, which will be connected to the new vaporization heating system that will be installed this summer as part of the LNG vaporization replacement project. This system will prevent ice and snow buildup all throughout the dike area. We have experienced frost heaving and pipe movement in the area in the past. The system will prevent this reoccurrence and also eliminate the need for snow removal by our staff. Are there any questions?
Jim, this sounds like it's a pretty critical function to keep that snow and ice from building up. I have to ask, if it's that critical, why wasn't it considered with the original scope of the plan? Why is it coming in as an amendment now? Seems like that's pretty critical. We should have been thought of back when we did the original estimate.
You know, that's a very good question, Director McGowan. Part of it is when the contract was originally signed, we were in the 20% design stage. And so you need to know the exact layout of the LNG pumps, the vaporization area, the spill containment troughs that are going to be installed, because all of that's going to be heated. So you needed more detail, I think, before you could get a better feel for the cost of this project.
So they were aware that it would have to be heated at some point in time, we just didn't know how much?
Yeah.
So maybe we should have been made aware of that. There's more to come. And let me ask you this, is there more to come on this project? Something that, like you just said, it was thought of, but it's not, we don't know enough information to include it. Is there more to come that we should?
You know, that's a very good question. We asked CHI Engineering that same question, and their reply was not at this time, no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have one.
Oh,
Sorry. Do you agree with the groundhog's assessment as our own personal groundhog? What do you have to say, sir?
he did see a shadow this morning, and he's predicting 6 more.
Days, yeah.
He did. It's going to be cold the next couple days. I know, you're cross your fingers. I think he might be right.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Vice President of Procurement and Enterprise Services, John Zellers, will now review the bids on materials and contracts.
Good morning.
That's under...
John Zellers, Vice President, Procurement and Enterprise Services. Bids on materials and contracts may be found under tab 9. The letter is rather short this month, and there's only 2 items that I would like to discuss, both of which can be found on page 2. We are recommending the bid from Kubota of Omaha for 4 Kubota R430 tractors. The board may recall approving the purchase of 4 Kubota R430 tractors in March of last year and 8 in October of 2020. Kubota is the only provider of this type of tractor that provides for articulation, allowing our crews to operate in tight places, minimizing disturbance and restoration. Kubota's bid represents a 4% increase over the purchase of the 4 units a year ago. The last item is a recommendation to reject the single bid from Aspen Equipment for a fuel and lube truck. This body was intended to be installed on a CNG chassis, also bid during the month of January. No bids were received for the chassis, as vendors were unwilling to commit to pricing due to long lead times for CNG chassis, which are currently estimated at 52 weeks. We are currently looking at diesel chassis options and on-light availability, and we'll be bringing this to the board in the future.
Okay.
And that's all I have, but we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, John, on page 1, the very first one, that water mains in Deer Creek, is that an infrastructure project, or is that a replacement project or not?
No, based on the job number, that's not an infrastructure project. That's a new construction.
That's okay, thank you. And then secondly, on the 6,600 feet of steel pipe on item number 2 there, where do we store that?
That will be stored at our service yard at 63rd.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Services and Extensions, Vice President of Engineering Construction, Corey O'Brien, Main Extensions.
Good morning. Corey O'Brien, Vice President, Engineering and Construction. Behind tab 10 is our main extension letter for this month. We do have 2 projects, both of them being water main extensions. The impact of these 2 projects is 177 single residence lots. And the map is up. You can see that one project is in subdivision 2 and the other project is down south in subdivision 7. Very briefly, on page 2, the developers for both projects have requested district gas also for their projects. And I would also note that item number 2, the Alta Colina Phase 1 project, the developer is doing that under the district's WCD policy, meaning that they'll contract directly with the contractor for the installation of the mains, and the district will still do inspection, pressure testing, and water quality testing. That's all I have this morning. Unless there are questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Personnel, Vice President of Human Resources, Bonnie Savine, wage and/or salary increases and ratification.
Thank you, Director Frost. Good morning. We'll begin by recapping the employee counts for the end of 2021 and 2022 January. January 31st of 21, we had 806 regular full-time employees and 4 regular part-time employees for a total of 810. To end this January, we had 814 regular full-time and 3 regular part-time for a total of 817. A review of jobs currently in various stages of the job placement process. We are really moving along quite a few jobs right now. Again, beginning of the year, we definitely are working with our departments to identify those new jobs within the budgeted headcount that they want to make available, in addition to our regular openings just due to natural attrition. So we have 8 jobs that have a requisition routing through the approval process. We have 20 jobs that are posted right now. 10 are internal only, 6 are external only, and 4 are both internal and external right now. 11 jobs are in the application review or interview stages, and we have 5 jobs that have 9 selected candidates that are going through the hiring process. So I would say we have 45 positions in process right now. About 25 are estimated to be filled externally over the next couple of months or so. The bulk of those are pipe layer trainees within the construction division. A quick follow-up from the January meeting. We had recommended the offering of long-term care insurance, a voluntary benefit for employees that was approved by the board. A question was asked by Director McGowan, are the monthly rates locked in? Does the employee pay the same rate until retirement? In response to that, the employee is locked into the age-banded category based on their age at the time of retirement. So there is a chance that rate could change over time with different factors through the industry and through that type of insurance, but the employee would remain in that age band from the time of their enrollment. So hopefully that provides that for you. Last but not least, before tab 11, Director McGowan had a question via email earlier last week, and it was regarding employee vaccination counts. We are at 75% fully vaccinated, completing an initial series of one of the 3 approved vaccines. So that is where we stand today. 75% have received, a first dose, 74% are fully vaccinated.
Is it more, are employees more vaccinated in the office or in the field? Is it about the same?
I can get you that answer, but we certainly we do have a couple of divisions that are operation focused that are in the mid-50s, and we have worked to make sure they have access to the on-site clinics that we have held, and that they are aware of the availability of vaccinations throughout the community. But I would say we certainly see somewhere between 55 and the 75. That's our total.
Okay, you don't have to go, I don't want you to do any work on that. I just thought if you had a feel for it and everything. But 75% is pretty good, but we still got to keep pushing to get it up higher, right?
Yes, yes. We certainly support that. If our employees can get vaccinated, we have encouraged them to do so on a regular basis. And I know that we have heard that message as well at our board meetings.
And Bonnie, just a quick follow-up. When you say fully vaccinated, does that include the booster shot?
It does not. We are only about 25%, between 25 and 30% boosted.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That we know of.
Correct. That has been reported.
Voluntary
Yes.
disclosure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great point. Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Behind tab 11, you will find the wage and/or salary increases and ratifications letter. Human Resources is recommending the Board of Directors approve wage or salary increases for 20 employees this month. 6 employees, OAC employees, are being promoted through the posting process through a normal promotion. 6 OAC employees are being promoted through the job progression process, and 8 SPA promotions are listed on the letter. There are no new hire ratifications for January.
Okay.
Any questions on that letter? Okay, and then tab 12. Tab 12 is the recommendation for the SPA, or Supervisory, Professional, and Administrative Job Group's salary structure adjustment for 2022. Existing salary scales for SPAs are reviewed on an annual basis. The 2022 adjustment recommendation continues to reflect management's commitment to the district's organizational excellence and financial responsibility pillars. Financial responsibility continues to be a focus for us, and we are managing to an approved budget, as you are well aware. Today's recommended 2.25% was included in the approved 2022 budget. Our management team also strives for organizational excellence, and we recognize our employees are essential to meeting the mission and vision of the district and providing services to our community. Their commitment to the district and our customers continues to be evident throughout this past year. Certainly, our employees have been outstanding all across the board, OAC and SPA. A salary scale increase is essential to acknowledging their work. As in previous years, we take many factors into consideration. The recommended adjustment is a collective effort. It's not made lightly. The information in the memo supports management's recommendation for the 2022 SPA salary structure adjustment of 2.25%. The adjustment would be effective March 1st following completion of the annual performance appraisal process, which is underway right now and expected to be completed within the next few weeks. Are there any questions?
Bonnie, just a couple things. Let's see, 1, 2, third paragraph, you say our organization has been able to maintain an adequate financial position.
Yes.
Not to mix words or not to be picky. I think we have more than an adequate financial position. I think we have a strong position because of some good management, and people are doing a good job with managing expenses and watching our revenues and everything. So I just say, yeah, I just want to have people say, instead of adequate, we have a strong financial position because of the hard work of the management and the financial people.
Thank you.
And then the second thing on the bottom of the page, the last paragraph, second sentence says, general increases are not part of any wage or salary determination for any particular position. What does that mean?
Tell me one more time where you are.
The first page, bottom of the page, last paragraph.
Oh, yes,
Second sentence, general increases are not part of any wage or salary determination for any particular position.
When we evaluate a position, I'm trying to, let me read the context of the whole paragraph.
Sure.
So when evaluating a position, if we do have to reevaluate an SPA job, we don't take into consideration, well, this job's going to get a general increase later this year, so it's in a good position. We don't need to adjust the salary grade. So the salary grade is specific to the skills, the abilities, the know-how, problem-solving, accountability, so all of the factors that are part of our grading system. So the general increase is just not part of a determination on what salary or grade the job should be in. So we just want to make sure we understand that this is an annual process and it's not specific to any one job.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Then on page 2,
yes,
on the bottom where we talk about the employees that have the different scores, you know, if you have a score of 1.99 or lower, what's the distribution of that? Do we have anybody in the last section that get no increase?
we have in the past. We're currently in the 2021 appraisal process. So like I said, we have about 3 weeks left in that process, and we can make sure we have the statistics for you next month.
Yeah, I'd like to see the distribution whenever you get it.
You bet. Thank you.
Hey, Bonnie.
Yes.
So last year in 2021, we had a very significant adjustment to the top end of our SPA grades when we brought Ms. Langle on as a senior vice president, and then we adjusted our longer-term senior vice presidents as well.
Right.
And looking in the comparison between those higher-end SPA positions from 20 to 21, so for the SPA 13 grade, the maximum increase for the scale only was approximately 21%. For SPA 12, it was 27%. For SPA 11, it was 33%. For SPA 10, it was 24%. And for SPA 9, it was approximately 22%. And with the 2.25% cost of living increase for the entire SPA scale, there's a possibility that with a progression increase, it could be a total of 7.25% for a particular employee or many employees in SPA. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And when we talk about pay compression, we're talking about that on a scale basis, not necessarily individual pay scales. Is that correct too?
Yes.
Okay. Given the significant increases that we've had at the higher end, and correct me if I'm wrong, for grades SPA 7 and below, were those increased last year when I think it was July or August, I can't remember the exact month, but did we do anything with SPA 1 through 7 at that time?
In March, we did the adjustment to the salary scales themselves. It was later in the year when there was an approved adjustment to the salaries of the senior team. So they were done separately.
Okay.
So yes, in March, when the scales were adjusted, all of these scales did have an increase. The scales for grades 8 straight, so not a director level, the 8, the 7, and further down to the 1, those received the general increase adjustment to both the minimum and the maximum of the scale.
So those is it 8 and below, we didn't approve an increase in the latter half of 2021?
Correct.
Okay.
And actually, we didn't approve an increase to the directors and up in the latter half. It was just the scales that were effective for 2021 were all effective March 1st.
Right, just like we're doing right now, we did that for 2021.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. What I'd like to propose for consideration to my colleagues is, and I'm not sure where that breakoff would be, SPA 7, but given the significant top-end maximum increase in the scale, I'm fine approving the 2.25% cost of living increase for the entire scale. But what concerns me is if we had a progression increase to those higher level positions that received a significant bump in their scale, the second part in 2021, if that makes sense. So what I'd like to open to my colleagues is if we could consider a progression freeze for SPA 7 and above while approving the 2.25% pay increase for SPA 6 and below, and allow SPA 6 and below to get a progression increase as well. That's a mouthful, and hopefully I made sense of it, but I'd like to open that up for consideration to my colleagues on the board.
Can I clarify one thing?
Please.
All of the SPAs that were at the director level 7, 8, and above, and the vice presidents, all of them were not at standard wage. So they would have been eligible for a progression increase this year had there not been a change to the salary structure. Those that were at the standard or the maximum of the salary grade last year did not get a progression increase. This year would have been the first year. So there are some employees across grades 1 all the way up through 11 who who are not at the maximum and would not have been regardless. So just making sure.
Sure.
And some are, and so they would not be eligible for another progression this year because they're already at the maximum.
And a quick question for you, and you may not know the answer to this, so I apologize beforehand. SPA 7 and above, how many employees are we talking about, ballpark? And if you don't know,
That's a good question.
I should have.
We probably, I mean, it is more than 50 because there are some individual performers at grade 7 and higher. Those would include some of our engineers, some of our supervisors, attorneys, and so, or accountants, biologists, et cetera, depending on how far they are within their job family. But the director level 7 is the 7D, and the 8D, that is the grade 8 director. There are about 40 people from the director level and up.
Okay. Thanks, Bonnie.
You're welcome.
I'm going to make a suggestion here, and you can kind of weigh it out. For clarity and transparency, we may want to, as we used to say in Lincoln, divide the question. You may want to make two proposals, one regarding the salary increase for the, let me get this straight, for the SPA, and one for the OAC. And that way we can kind of define the difference or what the increases are going to be. Give that some thought.
Yes, the OAC employees, their general increase and progressions are part of the bargaining agreement. And for the general increase this year, the OAC group is scheduled to get the 2.25% on April 2nd, effective April 2nd.
And no one will be getting an additional, other than step progressions or promotion kind of things, which is separate from this issue, no one's going to be getting a 5% plus a 2.5%.
Yes, the OAC employees that are not at the maximum or top step standard wage, they would also be eligible for their 5% progression increase on the date of their anniversary. So they are still eligible for that once a year or twice a year, depending on the job they're in addition to the general increase, if they're not at the maximum of their scale. It's just not all on the same date.
I think one of the problems here is it gets just a little confusing when,
sure.
And I can completely understand anniversary increases and the things that you're defining, but we may want to try to break this down a little more so that it's more transparent, as we like to say.
Sure. We can certainly provide the information if you have a request for that.
So my question, I think, is, what I'm seeking to do is clarify what I think I heard Jim say. So Jim, if you could, keep me on track here. What I think I understand Jim is saying is that for the top, I don't know if it's 4 or 5 or 6 tiers, they got anywhere between, I can't remember the numbers, like 17 to 22%-ish last year. So what you're saying is, while everybody else is getting the 2.25 plus whatever their progression might be in their step, you want to look at freezing the top people who already got, in some cases, an average of 20%.
Oh, goodness. Oh, yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
Because
I apologize for any confusion, and thank you for clearing through my...
I heard you give the numbers to begin with, and I thought I knew where you were going, and I was trying to make sure everybody else understood. You're not trying to take anything away from the other people who didn't get a raise, but it could be considered, and this is nothing against the people that are in the top 5 or 6 ranks or bands, but if they just got I'll just say 18-20% raise, and now they're eligible for 2 more and then possibly some progression, and then the people below them are getting 2.25, and if they're already at the top of band, that's all they're getting. You could have a disparity there where some people are saying, well, wait a minute, why? So
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Thanks for clarifying that. And for the record, I did support, when you came before the board in July, to make sure to avoid the compression issues that we've encountered repeatedly over the past number of years at the top end of our scale. So I do want to say I was in approval of that, but these multiple the large increases last year, along with this, makes me a little skittish to support.
I do feel like there should be some additional clarification then. The scale was adjusted but the employees did not get that % increase to their salaries. Of the 40 people, over half of them only got the general increase. That was part of the sale to you of getting your support to open up the scale. Again, over half of the 40 only received the general increase because they were already at the maximum. So this year would be the first time they would be eligible for that 5% progression increase, along with the rest of the SPA group.
So the scale was adjusted, but their individual salary was not?
That is correct.
Okay.
The only adjustments that were made outside of the policy, the 5% progression policy, was later in the year when we adjusted the senior team.
And did every member of the senior team get?
Yes, the senior team did have an actual salary adjustment. But again, for the vice presidents and the directors, they did not. Most of them received just the general, and those that were not yet at the maximum received the annual progression increase of 5%, just like the rest of the SPAs.
Okay, thanks
So
for that.
You're welcome.
the last page of your document here, you have the salary scales.
Yes.
Which ones of those did we adjust and approve last August, July or August to increase? What you said, we approved the scale, not necessarily increases for everybody.
We approved all of those scales in February for March 1st, but the late summer adjustment to salaries was those in grade 13. Those were the ones that we adjusted salaries on.
So we adjusted salary in August, not the scale.
Correct.
Okay.
That we adjusted within the approved March scale, March 1, 22 scale.
So to Jim's question then, not to single out anybody in 13, but is that what then you're talking about, is those people in 13 that might have gotten a?
That would have been the group that got a pretty significant increase.
Right. That is correct, yes.
And you're looking to do something to hold off on the general increase here on 13? I just want to make sure.
Well, the general increase for the entire pay scale, I'm comfortable with. The 2.25% scale increase for all SPA 13 through SPA 1. That's a cost of living adjustment that I'm comfortable with. Bonnie helped explain that not everybody, and corrected my misunderstanding of not everybody at those higher levels received a significant pay increase.
Okay.
So it actually was the SPA 13s that received the significant increase. So thanks for helping me understand that better.
No problem.
So are you looking, are you looking to do something with 13 because you still have the same kind of disparity between 12 and 13 that you did before
You're right, and I don't have an answer for you right now. I'll have to give it some thought between now and our regular committee to see if I would amend anything or if we would just propose it as is. And I'll be glad to talk to you between meetings.
Since we kind of talked a little bit about it earlier, I want to make sure that the rest of the board had that. What we were looking at was, through no fault of their own, if we gave the 13s $30,000 a year, I'm using just some raw numbers, and now on top of that they're going to get another raise where the other people didn't get any increase to their scale, but they're both getting the same 2.25. You do potentially have a disparity there, and you don't want to take it away from them, but maybe you throttle back. I don't know, maybe you throttle back what?
I'll talk to you in between meetings to come to a...
In other words, you may need to talk to all of us because I'm kind of confused, to be honest with you.
Right.
Are you saying that the 13 should not get the 2.25? Right. We all agree with that. But they shouldn't get anything else, just the 13? Is that what you're...
That I don't know. I was just answering to Dave. That's what I have yet to determine. So, and Mike, I appreciate your question, and I think I've confused myself and the board pretty well enough, so...
Well, and I really appreciate this discussion because I think it's pretty murky. I mean, we should be able to understand what's happening without, I know what you're saying when you're saying it's on paper. There's a step on paper, but not everyone has advanced to that step. But it's still pretty unclear, and I'd like more information. I appreciate Dave bringing this up, and Jim, for trying to clarify it, but I'm still real vague on it.
For me, as the newest member of the band, it is, I'd have to concur because now I voted in support those last two steps. That's how I'm conceptualizing it, because we certainly want to compensate talent. It's a very important function. And now, you can't go backwards in life, I've noticed, but it would have been helpful to have this concept introduced as we talked about it, as opposed to step by step, because now I'm paranoid and want to know what the next thing is that we're not thinking of that next year we're going to have to talk about in terms of these scales.
Okay.
And that's my problem, but I appreciate any help. Thank you.
I guess the one bit of information I would offer is with both our OAC and our SPA, we do have an entry and then a standard, or in the SPA's case, a maximum. That grade or wage scale is assigned to each job, and the employee is brought in either at entry or somewhere within the scale, and that's what they earn for the current period of time. For the SPAs, as of March 1st of each year, we assign or allow a general increase based on board approval, and that is applied to the salary scales to help keep them in line with the market and the economy, and that provides employees a general increase. If they are not already at the top of that scale, the maximum amount that you see in the dark blue column, then they are eligible for a 5%, or up to, I should say, 5% performance-based increase. It could be less than 5% if they don't achieve the requirements or the expectations of their performance appraisal. And so that's the nuts and bolts of it. The same methodology applies to our hourly employees. They are all eligible for the general increase 1 day a year, April, first pay period in April. And then on their job anniversary date, they're eligible for that 5% progression increase. So we do use the same process with everybody. It's just on a different time of the year. So again, we do not have anybody in grade 7D or 8D, 9, 10, 11, 12, or 13 at the maximum of their scale, because last year we did vote to, or you voted to allow us to open up the top of the scale so that we could, over the next several years, see employees who are meeting those performance requirements progress further up into the salary grade.
And let me clarify too, because you just said, Bonnie, we increased the scale, the maximum. And we did that because of the job market.
We did.
We had a problem last year, or not a problem, but an issue bringing in senior vice presidents to fill critical jobs and trying to get them to pay them what the market is allowing. So you brought us a lot of data, and we did approve raising the maximum for that. So we have the flexibility to hire the qualified people. So, you know, I don't look back and regret adjusting those scales, because we adjusted them to meet market demand and to allow us to hire good quality people.
Mark Doyle, President. I want to clarify on we're talking about the 13, right? The
Perhaps.
senior VPs.
That is the
We
same.
also did it, in my estimation, to recruit internally. And this is after experience of 11 years inside now. If you've been here for 30 years, and pardon me, but I'm talking about what I observed, and I got to call them like I see it, and you're tenured, your pension, you're only down to 1% a year, why would you step up to that next level if it's pretty much the same pay? And the last COO, we had a lot of discussion about that. It is a fundamentally different job. And I understand that. It's human nature if you're working at the next level down, and we have fine vice presidents. But it takes a lot to step up to the level where anything goes wrong, you're at the podium and you're talking to the public and you're working with an elected board coming from a wonderful elected board. And I'm not buttering you up as individuals. Director Kavanaugh and I talked about this earlier. this is a great cross-section of the public, and you are ratepayers, but we get 7 different opinions a lot of times, and that's great. So part of this was to recruit internally, and in my estimation, it's worked. I think employees will work harder and aspire to those roles, because I don't know if this is news. Part of the reason we're working, sure, this is a mission and this is almost a vocation when I compare it to something like banking, but you still work for wages, and it does motivate people to some degree. So I just wanted to say thanks for that support, and we have, these things don't come without a little bit of controversy internally, but the big picture is to incent the internal candidates, and that's the best. To me, that's the best. It really is.
And I do know, without naming names, some people have retired in the past that were good, qualified people, because like you said, why take the next step up? I don't get any more pay. I'm already vested. I might as well retire. I get what I get. With the new scale that we have, they say, well, wait a minute. I might work a couple more years, and I'll still be vested, but at much higher pay.
And I also think we should take a look at those next levels, same way, and at least have that discussion on whether they're equitable and whether they're working to incent internally. And we're heading toward a labor, not shortage, but we do have a workforce where we will have a harder time recruiting people, even to M.U.D. which we have a pension and great benefits, but everyone else is going to step up a little bit now. The ability to work from home and work as a IT technician or anywhere in the country from your home, we all know that's happening. So we need to take a look at that. And Ms. Savine also pointed out, maybe unintentionally, that the SPAs typically just follow right along with what the OACs bargain for. So the OAC's really fundamentally bargaining for the SPAs. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think it was rare, other than a few years where things were frozen, that the increase is the same, the general increase.
Since
is that
2013,
true?
yes,
Yeah.
that is correct.
So, yeah, I'm glad you're bringing it up, because I think it's worth talking about. But I did want to highlight part of that was internal equity and making sure that our rising stars, and we have a lot of them, are motivated to sit in this chair and the chair of the senior VPs. And I feel like that's been important.
So, Jim, just as a clarification, then we talked about, well, let's talk about it later. If, as chair of personnel, you make a motion and we approve to adopt this, then there really isn't anything to talk about till next year in terms of changing anything here, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
On the general increase, I guess that's true.
Right, and the progression increase would also be effective March 1st as well.
Okay.
Can I just want to weigh in, I haven't commented yet. I don't see anything wrong with these scales. I wouldn't change the scales. Now, if somebody within their minimum and maximum is making more than they should, then deal with it. But when we change the scales, that's going to impact years ahead, not just this year. And we already made that decision to compensate for both equity, recruiting, and diversity. You can't have it both ways. I would advocate leaving these scales alone and let the president manage his people.
And Tim, you bring up a good point, and I'm not advocating adjusting the scales at all, because as I said, I supported the increase, the second round that came through last year as well. So point well taken, but I was not proposing to adjust the scales. No. Since I've confused the hell out of everybody this morning, just add that to the list. Welcome to the Begley household, by the way.
And let me clarify or ask. Jim, you're saying that it's SPA 13s you're suggesting we don't give them the increase, just the 13s.
Okay. Under consideration.
Under consideration.
Yes.
Let me just say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bonnie, last summer when we adjusted the 13s and gave them a pay increase, that's because we brought some senior vice presidents in. Right. We had a lot of inequity. Yes. And we had to pay that to get the market people in that we wanted to get. And so we made some adjustments for equity. By not giving them an increase and giving everybody else an increase, I think you're penalizing those folks coming in because we just paid them adjustment to bring them up to market value. And as time goes on and they work hard, they do well in their performance, they should not be penalized and not get an increase just like everybody else. That's my position.
That's a good point.
That is a great point, Director McGowan. I can add that in the compensation guidelines, for somebody who changes jobs or is hired midway through a year, their progression increase of 5% is prorated. So some of those would be, they would not get the full 5% for the progression for this year, I should clarify, in grade 13.
Bonnie, thanks for your patience and your clarification, and I'm glad we had a good discussion
we have a
with
good
the board too.
We can talk about it, but I guess just to clarify for all my colleagues and everything, I will support what Bonnie proposes. I do not propose that we pick out a particular group and penalize them. I think they ought to be treated based upon their performance like everybody else.
Any other questions right now? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Clear as mud, Bonnie.
Okay, Judicial and Legislature, Government Relations Attorney, Rick Kubat, first legislative report for 2022.
Just a few items. Tab 13, yes, thank goodness it's a short session. Rick Kubat, Government Relations. On tab 13 is the board report. I'm going to skip around a little bit, so please interrupt me. I apologize, this first time through is a little bit longer just because we need to explain some new legislative proposals. Hopefully next month will be a lot more brief. We are in the short session, which is 60 days. They're tentatively set to adjourn April 20th. I'm going to go ahead and start right away on page 4. And at the top is Senator McDonald's LB 406. I bring that to your attention because last year this board voted to support that bill, and it was with the understanding that M.U.D. would have a seat at the table. When LB 406 was first introduced, they were going to have lay folks or non-state senators make up the Star Wars committee, and in its initial draft, M.U.D. was going to have a representative on that committee. In the waning days of the legislative session, that bill was going to pass, and they changed the Star Wars committee to have only sitting state senators. So what I'm recommending that this board do is that we change our position back to neutral, and then I'm going to discuss LB 406 is essentially going to become LB 1023, and that's the bill that's going to allocate money essentially to 3 different parts of the state: Lake McConaughey in Keith County, Lewis and Clark in Niobrara in Knox County, as well as of interest to the district, the Lower Platte River. In consultation with both Mr. Doyle and Mr. Mendenhall, it's our current message and positioning that assuming that that funding goes through for the Lower Platte Lake project, and again, it will be considered with LB 1023, we would like the Speaker and Senator McDonald to consider allocating a portion of money to make sure that any such project does not in any way negatively impact the public water supply in terms of the Lower Platte River. So that's where our position is right now. We've been in consultation. We're working with the City of Lincoln because they would have similar concerns. We've met with Speaker Hilgers. I've discussed the same with Senator McDonald, and those conversations will continue to happen as we move forward. So again, please interrupt me if you have any questions. I'm going to go ahead and move on to page 5, which is LB 809 by Senator Moser. That's a pretty important bill to the district. There's essentially 2 buckets of monies for lead service line replacement. There's the ARPA bucket, and then there's this bipartisan infrastructure act the bill that Congress passed in the middle part of November. Those monies through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act are going to flow into the state of Nebraska's revolving fund that is administered by the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. And essentially what I'm going to refer to it again as the SRF, or State Revolving Fund. Essentially what that is a loan program. What LB 809 LB 809 does is it does a couple of things for the district. It's a loan program that also provides loan forgiveness. This would increase the amount of loan forgiveness that NDE is able to provide from 50 to 75%. So right now, if you borrow $1, they could only forgive 50 cents. This would allow them to forgive 75 cents on the dollar. The other thing is that state revolving fund right now is primarily eligible for communities that have a population of 10,000 or less, making the district ineligible. LB 809 would get rid of the 10,000 population threshold for monies available for lead service lines, essentially enabling the district to access that pool of funds. In all likelihood, in terms of accessing federal monies for lead service line replacement, there's a good chance that the district's going to end up needing to go to the state revolving fund pool of money. On page 6, at the top is LB 847 by Senator Wishart. That bill would provide clarification that the district is allowed to use design build. And if I may step back, generally speaking, political subdivisions will put out a RFP to design a project, and then you'll have a second RFP to build the project. This bill, with the approval of 2/3 of this board, would allow the district to go out and do both at the same time, essentially one RFP for both designing and building the project. Folks in both the private and public sector often use this method on larger, more complex projects. It's essentially permissive legislation that clarifies that this board has additional latitude should 2/3 of you choose to use that process. LB 944 from Senator McCollister would have the tax commissioner establish a carbon intensity factor in the year 2023. Just like on our water and gas bill, your electric bill, you pay 5.5% state sales tax. What this would allow is for the public utilities, they would submit their information to the tax commissioner. If their carbon intensity factor was less than the state standard, if they were between 80 and 100% of the established state standard, their sales tax would be lowered by 1%. If you're between 60 and 80, 2%, all the way down to the point where if your carbon intensity factor were less than 20%, the 5.5% state sales tax would go away. So it's essentially a sliding scale to encourage public power to use greener, friendlier energies. Our recommendation on this is neutral. My conjecture is that this bill is going to struggle to get out of committee, let alone what happens after that. After that, we have LB 1002, introduced by Senator McDonald. That would seek funds from the American Rescue Plan for a $1 million allocation to the Omaha Public Power District, $1 million to M.U.D. for us to assist our clients that otherwise qualify for LIHEAP. On page 7 is LB 1008 by Senator Albrecht. Essentially what that bill does is it tells our state's political subdivisions that they can't ban choices of energy. As this board is likely familiar, in some jurisdictions throughout the United States, I know New York City and Berkeley, they've been putting bans on fossil fuel uses. This bill would essentially tell cities, towns, and villages, you can't prohibit any one energy choice. It's management's recommendation that we support that. That committee hearing is February 11th. I'm going to skip over all of the appropriations committees because LB 1012, 1013, 1014, those all merge together. They're the governor's proposal for ARPA. I'm going to speak to their specific underlying bills that are going to have their own committee hearings. And so I'm going to move right ahead to page 8, LB 1015. Is the Perkins County Canal project. That's the project that's been in the newspaper that the governor would like to allocate $500 million for a canal project near the Panhandle in Julesburg, Colorado. The purpose of such is the governor wants to assure that the state of Colorado continues to meet compact compliance from 1923. It's the Attorney General and the governor's position that the state of Nebraska actually has to put in infrastructure to guarantee that Colorado continues to comply with the amount of water that leaves the state of Colorado. Below that is LB 1023 by Speaker Hilgers. This bill has been prioritized by Senator McDonald. This is essentially the Star Wars allocation bill that I spoke to earlier. Again, within it has the Lower Platte River project, and we will be discussing the same with Speaker Hilgers in terms of the district's position that we want to make sure that whatever happens in the Lower Platte Lake, that the public water supply again is protected. Moving on down, we have LB 1046 by Senator Bosselman. That was the bill that's also been in the paper that would allow the governor to appoint. It essentially changes the makeup of both. It only applies to NPPD, the Nebraska Public Power District, and the Omaha Public Power District. What it would do is it would make both boards 9 members. 4 members of both boards would be elected at large. The governor would appoint the remaining 5 members of the board. In addition to that, the governor would appoint future CEOs. That bill had a lengthy committee hearing. There were 89 letters in opposition to that bill. No letters in support of that bill. Senator Bosselman was the only technically supportive testimony, the introducer of the bill. There was some other neutral testimony that was really, even though labeled, they came to the table as neutral, that was somewhat supportive. That bill has a good chance of making out of committee and may very well be debated on the board or on the floor of the legislature. The district was left out of that legislation, and at least for some strategical purposes, management is recommending a neutral position on that bill at this time.
Could you pause and listen? There's so many aspects to this, I don't know where to begin. Yes, we were left out, or M.U.D was left out of it, but as you well know, that's, sorry, I'll never get used to that. As you well know, that's merely an amendment on the floor. We are very easily included, and if not this time around, certainly the next time around. If the governor would get this traction, for me, having been in Lincoln and seeing how things progress, this is the first step on the road to privatization. And I know everybody's going to say, oh, well, that could happen. I'm not projecting it as happening this time on the floor, but to me, it's a slippery slope. And you've been down there, you've been around this carousel long enough to know how it stops. if this makes it out of committee, I'm adamant that we should oppose this. We shouldn't leave OPD and NPPD just hanging out there in the cold. We need to line up with our friends and say this is a terrible bill. This gives the governor so much control. And we've seen his track record. I mean, look at child welfare privatization, complete debacle. Look at prisons. Where we just start to talk about that. I'm really, really nervous about this bill. Not only is it terrible for us, for people that serve on boards, but it's also terrible for the state of Nebraska. And I'll stop there and give it back to you.
Gwen, I totally agree with you. I think it's a very slippery slope. We're left out for now. But what about the next step, you know? And to let the governor appoint and not the people, I'm sorry, that just doesn't set well with me. And I think we ought to oppose it right now and not wait till it gets out of committee. I think we ought to, I'd ask the board to consider, should we put out a document or something to say this board opposes this tremendously. We want to support the other utilities and, you know, keeping control in the hands of the people and not slipping down to privatization. And I don't know if we can, the board can send in a letter. There's 89 letters. Can this board, signed by every director, send in a letter and adamantly oppose that? Because I adamantly oppose it. I just think there's no way I can get even close to getting on board.
Well, under ordinary circumstances, and again, I'm sure Rick knows this as well as I do, a bill with this much opposition would probably be dead in committee. But Bosselman is the chair, so he can do a lot of navigating through there. He can attach it to a prettier bill. I was looking back here at some of these that we were discussing, and there's some possibilities. I mean, ideally, it has to be germane, but when you're the chair, you have a lot of leeway. He could prioritize this bill. He could slip this out. And I understand completely what Rick is saying, that we should be neutral, low to the ground, make no sudden moves. It's a smart strategy. But in this case, I mean, the track record is you let one country fall and you stay behind, then you're next.
I hate to lay low in the weeds because if it does get out of committee and it is debated, kind of come late to the party. You know what I mean? I just think we ought to come out strong and say we oppose it.
Well, we're probably not going to meet again before it comes out, don't you? Rick, have there been any developments in terms of movement?
No, I know that Public Power has been active in talking to committee members, and there is some hope that they might be able to keep it in the committee. When the bill was first introduced, I looked at it and said to myself, this bill's coming out of committee. And those are still my expectations. I think Public Power has a chance of maybe keeping it held, but my expectations are it's more likely than not it's going to come out on the floor. At times, in terms of recommending a district position, usually the opinion is rather strong. Sometimes this is more art than science and some strategy. I look forward to taking the direction of whatever 4 members of the board tells me to do. In the back of my mind, I'm also cognizant that Senator Bosselman has at least, I believe, 2, if not 3 years left. And to some respect, I was hoping to stay off the radar in terms of this kind of legislation. I knew that if we came forward and we opposed it at the committee stage via testimony, that was almost the fastest way to assure that the district is amended out on the floor. So in a strategic sense, if the board does incline to go in a different direction than management's recommendation and opposing it, we'll certainly carry that message forward.
Really good comments by our colleagues once again, and I'm old enough to remember that conservatives believed in local control of government. In my 48 years, almost 49 years, I can never remember a bigger power grab in the state of Nebraska than LB 1046.
Yeah, it had, and I have my notes, in Public Power did a very nice job at the committee hearing. OPPD's president, Javier Fernandez, did a nice job. You had Neil Swiss from Loop Public Power District, the League of Women's Voters, Al Davis with the Sierra Club, Tom Kent, who's the CEO of NPPD, the Southern Public Power Association, the Nebraska Power Association, all the public power players were lined up and adequately and specifically alluded to what you talked about, that this eludes the electorate, eludes the public the ability to choose their board members, and there's problems in terms of the structure of a CEO being appointed by the governor, which I talked to Mr. Doyle about this, and also being responsive to the board. The president wants to go down path A, the board wants him to go down path B. If I'm appointed by the governor, I tell the board, I don't much care for what you think. I'm appointed by the governor, I'm going to do what I want. So that aspect of the bill is certainly problematic. My expectations are that the CEO piece of the bill gets removed in all likelihood should something advance to the floor. I believe that the only piece is going to be the appointment of board members by the governor.
I just want to say I personally oppose this. Don't get me wrong. I have a lot of concern going against the recommendation of our man on the ground, our expert. So that's my concern, is how strategically we do this. But please don't get me wrong. I oppose this. In case I vote to stay neutral, there's a reason for that.
And I would concur about it. There's a lot of artistry involved in navigating, and if you're there every day and you're in the rotunda listening to who's doing what to whom and what people's proclivities are. But I do want to go on the record. I guess I will simply emphasize the fact that it's been only recently that we are able to have elections by district. And while there have been many fine people who've served as at-large elected members on this board and other boards, this is closer not only to the concept of America, but also isn't it closer to the concept of public power? Isn't that to me, it's one of the unique things about our state. And this, it doesn't even seem like it should be possible in the context of the laws that we passed to create public power. But then, we're going into the third year of a pandemic. So what's to understand? You just put one foot in front of the other. I appreciate your hard work and will remain hopeful. It is an awful bill.
I want to put a little bit of a cap on it, but I won't draw it out too long. The reason I mentioned working for a wonderful board earlier is this bill has me really thinking. And Director Begley, you stole the words out. Yeah, I guess local control works when it works for you. But yeah. So this is the epitome of local control. And I have a unique position here. I became very interested in public utilities and was able to be on this board for almost 18 years. I wouldn't have that same chance on a corporate board. And by the way, this board of directors, there was some dialogue about whether they're qualified to run a utility or not. This is the epitome of local control, and you are ratepayers. I don't know that the appointed directors would be customers. I don't know that. Maybe they would be. But I've seen this board come from so many different walks of life, and it forces management to operate a little differently when we're discussing what we do or don't do in our policies with our customers. You are our customers. You are customers, and you represent customers. So I'm happy to hear that we're all together, and I understand Director Kavanaugh's comments about following Rick's lead. But this is one of those times where we have two former state senators. Rick's doing the best he can. We'll always make our best recommendations. But if the consensus is to is to not support. We want to follow your lead on this. We don't know it all, and that's the beauty of working for a board that's not managing to quarterly stock profits.
And I've been there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know.
And you have a heart. You have a
Yes.
heart, and we have a heart.
Yes.
And we treat our customers differently than if we were a privatized corporate board. I promise you
It
this.
is totally different. I have
Yes.
to tell you, the environment and
Yes.
everything. But we have gone on record, this board, this utility, M.U.D, totally against privatization, publicly and everything, because of good reason for it. We save our customers money, we got all those good reasons, and we've gone on record for it. So and I just don't see the downside of going on record opposing this out of the chute. But I defer to Rick, like Tim said. But what's the downside if we oppose it?
The downside is to put us, as we said, and as Director Howard said, we could get amended anyway. I mean, it's possible to be included through amendment or some other way with the, anyway. But the main reason is just to, we're not included, it's not our fight, but again, it kind of is our fight.
Yeah.
So.
And Mark makes such a good point.
It is.
It is our fight.
Yeah.
It is our fight. And this just riles me so much because so often on the floor I would hear local control, local control.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a mantra.
Yeah. Right.
But when it comes to a personal vendetta, it's cast aside. And you go with what, and there's background to the story, as there always is to any story. And if you want to know more about that, you could always ask Rick or possibly me. But I think I sat through watching that entire hearing. There were excellent people that gave their time and came down and testified and spoke to why it's working well now, why it doesn't need to be changed. When you stop and consider, the governor could appoint 5 people out of a 9-person board. Who are those 5 people going to be loyal to? I mean, all you've got to do is look at his current Health and Human Services and the director. I mean, it's clear. I find this bill really frightening. I think this is a terrible, terrible bill. I wouldn't have envisioned this coming. I would never have thought it would come out on the floor. When I was down there, if you had 89 people writing in and saying, I'm in opposition to this, it's dead. It's not going anywhere. That vehicle 1046 might be used for another issue entirely.
Yeah.
But I think we need to be in opposition, not to contradict Rick. I think he's excellent. I think he's a brain trust that we're lucky to have. And many a time he and I are kicking around these things. But on this one, I'm adamant.
Rick, don't we also run the risk that once it gets out on the floor, we could be at it anyhow?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I understand that, but I just also think, this is so important to us. We hear all these comments and everything, but it just seems like we got to go on the record and publicly state we're opposed to it and help our fellow utilities. Like public power in Nebraska is a great thing. Why are we even, like when the governor appoints 5 people? Come on, I wouldn't be on this board if it was that way, so.
Yeah.
At what point can it be amended to include us? How far, right up until the final floor on the vote, the day before?
The day of.
What kind of operation is that down there? Honestly.
The only good thing we've got going is it's a short session and, yeah.
Hey, Rick, just to bring us back to, in recent years, there have been bills introduced. I know Senator Wayne had a bill that he introduced to study the privatization of the public utilities. Have we always maintained a neutral stance in similar bills in the recent past?
I would say it was bill by bill specific. There's been times, more often than not, when it's a bill that substantively negatively impacts public power, we've been there to support our sister or cousin utilities. Yes, I would say it's bill by bill specific. I guess, in terms of bringing it back, listening to the conversation amongst the board members, assuming that there are 4 of you that would in fact are inclined to oppose it, I would just ask, that the motion could be made to provide myself with a little bit of latitude that we oppose it when it hits the floor, and then I'll go ahead, if, as soon as it's out of committee, I'll inform the full board of where the bill's at and what's going on with it.
How about this idea?
That's totally
Remember how
fair.
you used to put, we have a letter, it gets to every senator in their box, or every aide of our opposition, and then when the bill comes to the floor, we find somebody to hand it out again as the floor debate's going on, and ideally identify a couple of champions to put it into the record. Does that sound like a plan?
Does that work for you?
Again, I'm happy to take direction from the board. 4 of you, that's what you'd like, happy to do it. And if I can back up, this bill has had a lot of thought in terms of what management's recommendation is. My recommendation at this juncture is to remain neutral. I'm the sailor, you're the captain of the ship, happy to do whatever you'd like to do in terms of that. But if you move us to an opposition, I'll make sure we submit written testimony. Should it get out on the floor, Director Cook, I can do just that and ask that we be read into the record. Because it was a timing issue for us in terms of when the public hearing was and when this board was allowed to vote on the bill itself.
Director Begley, as far as opposition, the last time there was a serious privatization within the last 10 years, do you recall? I think it was Senator Lautenbach. We went in hard opposition. I went on Scott Voorhees' show. I went down to the hearing.
I went down with you.
You did? Okay, I was going to say.
I was there in the room with that. I didn't go with you.
Okay, my memory is, so this isn't without precedent. We do, I don't know if that's what you were asking, but I do recall that.
No, that's exactly what I was asking. Thank you. And also, if I respect the great work that Rick does for us, but anytime any one of us run for the board or any other offices we run for, how many times do we say, I will fight for this, I will fight for that? If we can't fight for our own natural gas and water utility, what the hell are we doing here? So I will throw that out. Timmy brought up a great point. Rick, I like your strategy of if it should make it out, then we can amend our position on it accordingly.
I would hate to have a ratepayer, if it would go out on the floor and we get included, they say, where were you? Why didn't you fight for me? Like you said. I'd like to be on the record and oppose it, just for supporting the people who elected us.
Well, there's not a question that the rates would go up if this became a private organization. It just follows suit. I appreciate Tanya's suggestion so much, and I certainly am in agreement.
How about we do a straw poll, and if there's 4, let's move along. I mean, 4 against, or 4 that want to oppose, then it's kind of done, isn't it?
Is it 4 or 5?
How many are we?
4. Well, he needs 4.
5.
The other, Director Friend, the other way is just when we actually get to the actual board meeting, I think Rick was saying, if we could pull that one out and take a separate vote on it, just who's
Well,
chair?
that's kind of what I meant. I mean,
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Who's chair of the committee?
Tanya Cook.
Okay. well, you got this.
Lucky me.
You got this, yeah.
Well,
okay,
I
thank
like
you.
that idea. Thank you. Let's do that.
Well, we've made a mess of that one.
That's the sausage-making
Yes.
process.
It's reflective of how things get done in Lincoln.
It's going to be 7-0.
If I'm allowed, I'm going to move on to LB 1081 on page 9, and thank goodness I'm almost done here. That one is Senator Bostar, and that requests $200 million of American Rescue Plan dollars to specifically the city of Lincoln, essentially for them to get to work on their alternative water supply. As this board's aware, Lincoln's in a position where, in all likelihood, they're going to need to build another treatment facility either on the Missouri River, or if it works for both parties' interest, they could potentially hook into our system. This would seek that amount of money for them to figure that issue out for themselves. am recommending that we support their position for those ARPA funds. On that same page is Bill 1146 from Senator Friesen. This bill, in all likelihood, is targeted to school districts avoiding getting a vote of their people when they go out to bond. Sometimes they might use an interlocal agency to do the bonding for them. I believe that Senator Friesen's issue, I discussed with Senator Friesen that this bill could be problematic for CPEP, the Central Plains Energy Project. It would require an M.U.D. board member to sit on the CPEP board rather than Mr. Knight. It also could be problematic in terms of when we need to bond, the timing of having to send that out to a vote of the people. I've relayed this to Senator Friesen. He told me should this bill advance, he's more than happy to work with us to make sure that CPEP gets removed from the bill. Management's recommendations to oppose it, just wanted the board to be familiar with what's going on. And then finally and lastly, on the last page, is Senator McDonald's LB 1196, and that seeks $45 million specifically for the district for lead service line replacements. And that did get a committee hearing March 3rd. The $45 million number, just so that this board's aware, in today's dollars, we estimate we have 17,000 lead service lines in our jurisdictions at a collective cost of $119 million. The reason why the $45 million number has been chosen is because that is, as of today, our best estimate of what we could spend through 2026, because that's when the ARPA money has to be spent by. This is certainly a long-term project that we're going to be engaged in over a number of years, but wanted to bring that last bill to your attention. So with that, I promise the board that the next time I'm at the podium, it'll be a lot more brief.
Rick, on that, can I clarify that on the service lines? Those are owned by our ratepayers, right?
That's correct.
And this would be a fund that we can assist those ratepayers in replacing it. It's their responsibility, but this is a fund that they can tap to pay for it?
What I would say, Director McGowan, is the money would be directly allocated to M.U.D, and we would just go out and start contacting homeowners and getting known service lines with high lead levels. We'd tell them, this is your opportunity for you to get your service line replaced for free. But the money would be directly allocated to M.U.D.
To M.U.D, but the ratepayer that replaces the line, there would be a mechanism to come to M.U.D to tap that fund to pay for it?
Yes.
And I'm kind of presupposing, as I consider this, that many of these lines will be in the older parts of town, and families are already potentially dealing with a house losing heat, maybe lead paint. Not suggesting that it's everybody, but I think this is a good idea to try to at least have some place for people to start if that's necessary. So.
Those lead service lines are primarily located east of 72nd, and part of our argument, both in terms of the American Rescue Plan and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act dollars, is they are supposed to go to disproportionately impacted communities. So we'll be putting together information in terms of those census tracts and where the lead service lines, and using that as part of our argument in terms of trying to get access to these funds.
Thank you.
Rick, thanks for the great job you and your staff always do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Accounts, expenditures, finance, and rates. Mr. Schaffert will review the proposed renewal of financial services agreement with Piper Sandler and Company.
Good morning, Joe Schaffert. I serve as the Chief Financial Officer for the district, and I have a few topics, the first of which can be found behind tab 14. And as Board Chair Frost indicated, it relates to the renewal of a financial services agreement with Piper Sandler for a term that would commence today in the event the board approves this and end December 31 of 2024. We do have two representatives from Piper Sandler joining us virtually in Kansas City, so they're dealing with snow, no doubt, this morning. Todd Gaffoy is Managing Director, Public Finance Investment Banking, as well as Matt Courtney, who's Vice President of Public Finance Investment Banking. And I work with these two gentlemen frequently and have always valued their counsel. So the agreement addresses two primary services. The first is serving as a financial advisor for bond issuances, according to a fee structure that's $1.25 per thousand of bond issuance at a maximum of $125,000. Given the bond that we're proposing that you'll see in the next item, they will hit the maximum. And just in terms of how this gets paid for, when we talked at budget time about bond issuances, the general guideline is a bond costs about 1% of the face amount to issue, and that 1% goes to pay the financial advisor, bond counsel, underwriting, you pay to get credit agency ratings, all of that's within the 1%. So effectively, you've already seen this as part of the 2022 budget, but in the interest of transparency, I just wanted to share with you how these fees get paid. The bond is sized accordingly to pay issuance costs. I should note Piper has already spent considerable time helping us with this bond since there's a resolution of the next item. The other service that gets addressed in this agreement is an annual retainer of $10,000. Our last agreement actually expired at the end of 2018 following the issuance of two bonds in 18. And I've called Piper Sandler on numerous occasions since then and have never received a bill for service. So I think that's reflective of the kind of the partnership arrangement we have with Piper Sandler. And this is no change in fee structure from the prior agreement, I might add. I think the value and experience and expertise that Piper Sandler brings to the table is probably best demonstrated by the fact that they rank top 10 nationally in terms of municipal bond issuances, and they lead in the Midwest market. So they are involved in the most issuances in the Midwest market. And since I've been here, Piper has helped with every bond offering we've done that have totaled $259 million, one for the water side of the business in 2015, and they helped us with both the water and the gas bond in 18. So this approval, your approval, will enable us to execute the document with Piper Sandler. Are there any questions?
I just have a question. So when they didn't send a bill, did they send a letter that says, we're not sending you a bill? Like a record of some sort? This is just how Tanya manages her own finances.
Kind of to acknowledge that you'd received a bill, maybe.
Sure, or just.
They did not send a bill.
Or a letter that says, we're not sending you a bill.
They did not send a letter, they're not sending us a bill. So I think in honesty, Director Cook, I think what occurred is my predecessor and the predecessor of Todd negotiated this deal, and frankly, I think I'm not going to pin it on my predecessor, lost track of the fact that there was this, I just assumed it was still in place, because I rely on them. So we didn't get the $10,000 bill, is what it amounts to.
Right, and to be clear, I don't want bills, but I also don't want, I don't know, this is a public entity, some sort of audit, some sort of, oh yeah, well, I forgot. I would prefer something that says, thank you for we love working with you, and as an indication of that, we've not, you know what I mean? What the word should say, no. Even if it's an email message.
And they may be listening this morning, too.
Yeah. Hi, everybody in Kansas City.
Good point taken, thank you. Any further questions on tab 14? So moving on to tab 15, this actually addresses the bond resolution itself. The board is aware that the 2022 budget included bond financing and net proceeds of just shy of $122 million, $80 million for the LNG project, and another $41.9 million for the gas infrastructure replacement activities. As we further refined estimates for both the LNG project and looked at, say, financing strategies for gas infrastructure replacement, we're actually requesting an increase to the proceeds to $130.7 million, but I want to make it clear it's not due to increased costs. It's a change in financing strategy, which I'll explain. So the two new components of the bond are $70.3 million for LNG, which is actually lower than what we said at budget. And again, it's not because costs went down, or at least it's not known they're going to, but the cost estimates that drove the $80 million included about $10 million of contingencies. It's a complex project. Obviously, Jim Knight spoke about an issue earlier in the board meeting that I think is demonstrative of the fact that these complex projects sometimes result in costs that weren't anticipated when you base the budget on a 20 or 30% design. But the reason I want to borrow less is this is a separate color of money that funds the bond carrying cost. And I don't want to charge our ratepayers for something that I'm not certain I need. So that's the reason we've lowered the bond amount a little bit. On the flip side, the gas infrastructure replacement component, I'm actually increasing by about $18.5 million. Two drivers to that. When we put together the budget, we assumed that the GER component of the bond would fund spending for 2022 through 2025. And the budget had kind of a placeholder for 2026, because as you know, we do a 5-year planning window. We're going to address the 2026 funding, or at least we're recommending, as part of this bond issuance. We don't ever try to time the market. I think it's despite the volatility, it's expected that this will be good interest rates when we pursue this bond. The other thing contributing to the increase was the budget didn't reflect the abandonment portion of spend, and it's such an integral part of abandoning and replacing. We're putting this in. We funded it from operating cash. So rather than spend on operating cash, it's part of an asset that benefits more than one generation of ratepayers, which is why we bond things. So that's the reason for the increase. And again, it goes back to color of money, as I talked about. LNG is funded with one color of money. Gas infrastructure replacement is funded with another. And when we size again gas infrastructure replacement component, it's the GER, or gas infrastructure revenue, compared with what we expect to spend. The difference is what we bond. And in this case, we've added a year to the bonding period. Does that make sense? And I should note that with the board's approval, the next step in the process would be getting a rating from credit rating agencies. We actually have meetings scheduled for next week, tentatively, pending board approval. One on Monday, one on Tuesday, one with Moody's, one with Fitch. And that's just part of getting bond issuance done. So in addition to Piper Sandler, we would have Gilmore Bell as our bond counsel. Colleen Duncan is also joining virtually in the event there are any questions on the resolution, because I drafted a 30-page document, which we're not going to go through page by page, Director Fred, for your benefit.
Thank you very much.
So that is really the extent of my comments on that topic, unless there are any questions.
Joe, just to clarify, when you meet next week with the rating agencies, are you just reviewing it? Are you trying to get their approval? What do you seek with those?
They issue an actual credit rating, Director McGowan. So they say, based on the assessment of M.U.D. and this bond offering, here's our credit rating, which obviously drives interest rates. So it's a separate rating from our overall credit rating. Do I expect it to be the same? That would be my hope, or better. But
That's what I was thinking. Why wouldn't it be?
You would
I don't think
expect that it would be.
changed.
It's just that the issuance has a credit rating for the issuance.
So it's part of the process?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
We prepare extensively, and we take these as very important meetings. I would say that.
Yes, Mr. Doyle will participate, Gina Lang will be, Jim Knight, I will be, Mark Myers, and the team from Piper Sandler. So yeah, they're a big deal. And then the final topic
is insurance and pension.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Shafford will review the 2021 retirement plan and other post-employment benefits.
Good morning again. Joe Shafford, CFO for the district. So behind tab A is a report from Vanguard that talks about the financial performance for both the pension and the OPEB trust funds. I won't steal any more thunder from Jill Wolfram, who will present, other than to say the returns were strong. 13.7% for the pension plan and 14.99% for the OPEB plan, which feels really strange when you consider the volatility we've had so far this year. It seems like a distant memory, December 31. But in any event, very strong returns. Joe's presentation to the full board is to be in compliance with our investment policy statement, which requires it. But I think the full board is aware that Joe does present to the Insurance and Pension Committee 4 times a year. So they've seen a detailed version already of this presentation. So with that, if Mr. Wolfram is ready, and I would ask to get his presentation queued up so he can walk you through it.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Want to just make sure everyone can hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So first of all, I want to thank you on behalf of Vanguard for your trust, your confidence, and your commitment to Vanguard, especially as we begin our 14th year together in this relationship. So I also want to start out by saying I can't say enough good things about the Insurance and Pension Committee. The board itself, the fantastic group of people to work with, you know, and just a pleasure. It really is great when I can meet with a group that truly understands the benefits of the long-term strategic outlook and really the pitfalls of trying to make tactical tilts over the market. So over the last 14 years, you know, we have had a lot of volatility, as Mr. Shepherd has pointed to, particularly even in the first month of this year. It's been very volatile markets, but over the past few years, we've had pretty strong returns across the pension plan portfolio and the OPEB portfolio, despite times where there may have been occurrences where, you know, we've considered, or the thought was we should get out of the markets at this point in time. That we find that to be very destructive overall to portfolio. So just beginning on slide 2, I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about the returns themselves and the year, and then I'm going to follow up with a few comments just regarding our outlook for 2022. The presentation's 23 slides long. I'm really just going to focus on this slide 2 for the most part. Beginning on slide 15 are all the details about the 2021 performance for both the retirement plan and the OPEB plan. So if there are any questions or comments, please stop me during my presentation, but understanding you know, where we're at from a time perspective, I'm going to try to keep my comments very brief. So first of all, as Mr. Shepherd said, the pension plan portfolio for the 1-year period was 13.7%. The portfolio itself began the year at $511.5 million. There were contributions of $16.9 million, disbursements of about $23 million, and the investment return, or that portion, that 13.7%, represented about $70 million, or actually over $70 million in return. So at the end of the year, at 12/31/21, the portfolio had increased from $511.5 million up to $507.1 million. So a significant increase on an annualized basis. The OPEB plan, which is more heavily invested in equities, so the OPEB plan is basically 25% fixed income, where the pension plan is 32% fixed income. Because equities had such a strong year, performance was stronger. So the OPEB plan on a 1-year basis returned almost 50%. The OPEB plan began the year at $60.3 million, had positive net cash flow or contributions of about $9.7 million, and then had investment returns of also $9.7 million, so almost exactly matching that. So at the end of the year, at 12/31/21, the portfolio value had increased from 60.3 up to almost 80 million, or $79.7 million. As you can see on this slide, almost every quarter had very strong performance, except for that third quarter of 2021. And you can recall that there were supply side issues. There was a little bit of volatility, particularly on the equity side of the market, even though basically interest rates did go down a little bit, which caused positive returns there. The strongest asset class for that 1-year basis was the real estate fund. So when you think about real estate or real estate investment trusts, although on an annual basis in 2020, they were down about 8%, they had very strong rebound, and this year they were the strongest performing asset class with 40% returns. So overall, very strong year with respect to equities and fixed income, basically slightly down on an annualized basis, but that was that was expected due to the increase in rates. Furthermore, this is the third consecutive year of strong positive results. So in 2019, we had, at least for the retirement plan, basically over 20% returns in 2020, about very strong returns of basically 14%, and finally this year, very strong returns, about 13.7%. Historically, so going back to inception for the pension plan, returns were almost 10% a year, which far exceeds the expected return on asset or discount rate assumption going into this year of 6.75%. And likewise, the OPEB returns since inception, which don't go as far back, but they go back to March of 2016, 11.36% on an annualized basis. So again, very, very strong returns. Do have some unfortunate news to share. Is the month of January, as you may be aware, it was a crazy few weeks in the markets. At no point in time has the stock market ever been down as much in the first 16 trading days of January as it was in January that just passed, particularly by Monday, January 24th. Even just last Thursday, the S&P narrowly avoided that 10% correction value, and the prior Wednesday, the Fed did signal what many were bracing for, basically signaling higher interest rates in the year ahead. And this just goes back to the point I want to reemphasize, that really nothing destroys a good long-term plan as much as extreme short-term volatility. So generally that volatility throws people off track. It often gets them to do things that are emotional rather than rational. And again, that's why we have a very solid long-term strategic focus and try to avoid any tactical shifts. That being said, there are no changes recommended for the portfolio at this point in time. We did do a review, an asset allocation study that we showed the results to the committee on January 24th. And at that point in time, again, there were no changes suggested to the portfolios themselves. Overall, I do want to just remind the committee and just in general that there is, going back to 1980, there has been one attention-grabbing downturn basically every 2 years, where an attention-grabbing downturn would be considered a correction, which is a decline of 10% or more, or a bear market, which is a decline in equities of 20% or more, lasting over a 2-month period. So again, going back to 1980, there have been 11 corrections and there have been 8 bear markets. So we do understand volatility does exist. There have only been 2 years historically, going back to 2009, where the portfolio returns were negative. That was in 2015 and 2018. And I just want everyone to be aware that our expectations, although over the last few years, returns have been very, very solidly strong, well in excess of 10%, our forward-looking expectations aren't for returns to be as robust as they have been in the past. And a lot of that is just because of where we are in the market cycle. So we have had over a 10-year bull market in equities, and likewise in fixed income, as rates have come down, fixed income returns have been very strong. So from where we're standing, looking forward, we've had a significant bull market run. Interest rates are at an all-time low. So going forward, our expectations are for less robust returns. Slide 3 basically just shares some of our global scenarios. And again, everything is going to really be very dependent upon the vaccine itself. So vaccine awareness is basically going to be the driver, and basically the resurgence or possible resurgence of COVID and variants. Global macroeconomic policy shifts are really going to guide the course of the world economy through the next year. And we do see the common thread basically across all regions. They're tied to the fate of the global supply recovery. And even as policy shift gears, there's some uncertainty remains about supply normalization and other factors. This table itself describes the 3 possible states of the global economy, and our central case is basically the one where global demand stays robust while supply gradually recovers, and it still keeps moderate upward pressure on price inflation. So that's all I really have for the formal section of the presentation, unless there are any questions about specific outlooks. Again, one thing to point out is that U.S. equities have not been this overvalued since the dot-com bubble. So again, our expectations are really for muted returns going forward. Otherwise, I'm just wondering if there's any questions about our forward-looking assumptions, about anything regarding the portfolios over the past year, or anything else specific that we can, Vanguard can address.
No, I just appreciated the reminder to hold fast to the strategy and not freak out and change everything watching the markets. So thank you.
Thank you. And it is, I have to remind myself of that as well. It's very difficult.
What are you seeing in the market today? How's it? We've been in here.
So far, I think equity markets are up slightly. Actually, no, now they're down slightly. So the Dow's down about 32. I mean, it was a not to say a flat day.
Kind of indicative of how it's been going.
It has. So yesterday being the first day in February was up, but January was really a very negative month. So at least for the S&P, first negative month in a while, actually. With the S&P down about 5.3% in January.
And Gwen, like you said, the market's down just a little bit, but I was checking. What's kind of scary is the gas prices, natural gas prices are up 14% today.
There's your article.
And it's because of the snow and East Coast and everything.
Are we done with this? Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns, or thoughts?
Yeah. Do any board members have any further comments?
No, just appreciate it, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Hey, thank you so much.
Okay. Ready? Due to COVID-related precautions, members of the public have access to the meeting via a WebEx connection that is set up in a conference room adjacent to the boardroom at the headquarters building. If there are any members of the public who would like to address the board, I would ask the conference room moderator to please escort them to the boardroom so that they may do so in person.
Chairman Frost, we did have Mike Leffler from Northern Natural Gas in attendance for most of the session, but he had to leave for an appointment, so we don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay. The committee meetings have now concluded. We will reconvene for the regular monthly board meeting in 10 minutes at 10:40. 5 seconds.
Ready, everybody.
I would now like to call the meeting to order. I'm Jack Frost, Chairperson of the Metropolitan Utilities District Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome you all to the regular board meeting this morning, February 2nd, 2022. This meeting is being live streamed from the boardroom at the M.U.D headquarters building located at 7350 World Communications Drive, and a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the M.U.D website after the meeting's conclusion. I would like to announce that due to COVID, we are limiting the number of attendees at today's meeting to the extent possible. Unvaccinated people are required to wear masks, and all attendees are encouraged to abide by the 6-foot social distancing rule. Thank you for your cooperation in this regard. In the interest of protecting the health and safety of any members of the public, those who may be attending today's proceedings may do so from an adjacent conference room. If any member of the public wishes to address the board, they will be escorted to the boardroom by the conference room moderator. Roll call.
Bagley?
Here.
Cook?
Here.
Friend?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
McGowan?
Here.
Howard?
Here.
Kavanaugh?
Here.
I would like to advise all those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available on the wall at the back of the boardroom, and a copy is also available in the nearby conference room set aside for members of the public who may attend. I'd like to mention here that this board is subject to a recently enacted requirement under the Open Meetings Act that limits virtual attendance to half of the total number of its annual meetings, which in the case of M.U.D's regular monthly board meetings is 6 meetings per year. Due to the statutory requirement, virtual attendance at any meeting by any single director will count as one of the 6 permitted meetings. Once the 6 meeting limit has been met, a board member will be permitted to attend virtually, but will be subject to the following limitations. They cannot vote, their presence will not be acknowledged in the minutes, and they cannot actively participate in that particular meeting. Unless and until such time as the governor may issue an executive order modifying the parameters for virtual attendance under the Open Meetings Act, as was done in recent years in response to the pandemic, we will continue to track the number of virtual meetings remaining that are permissible in attendance with the Act by announcing the number at the beginning of each monthly board meeting. At this time, this board has 5 more virtual meetings available for 2022. I would like to emphasize here that this is in no way intended to discourage any board member from attending virtually if they have health concerns or any other issues for that matter. It is only intended for all of us to be mindful of this statutory requirement. Thank you. And now for those who wish to participate, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of minutes for the committee meetings and regular board meetings for January 5th, 2021.
So moved.
A motion.
Second.
Discussion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Capital expenditures, Director Friend.
Capital expenditures discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Gina Langle to the committee dated January 28th.
Second. Discussion.
I just want to point out, I think we might have old maps in here, just for future board meetings.
Oh, really?
I think the maps are old.
Yeah, if I could, sorry, Chair Frost, just want to address that quickly. That's come up a couple times. We're aware of that. Our IT team, our GIS team within the Information Technology Department is working on updating those in addition to updating our website. So we need to get those, all of that updated, and we are working to get that done.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Acceptance of contracts and payment of final estimates.
We didn't vote on.
Oh, what? Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Roll call
We didn't.
for capital.
Okay. Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Acceptance of contracts and payment of final estimates. Director Friend.
Also discussed in committee, I move approval as outlined in the memo from Stephanie Henn dated January 26th.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Water Infrastructure Partner Hawkins Construction. Director Friend.
Also discussed in committee, move approval as outlined in the memo from Stephanie Henn dated January 24th.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Amendment to LNG Capital Improvement Project contract with CHI. Director Friend.
Discussed in committee, I move approval as outlined in the memo from Denise Dolezal dated January 26th.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Main extensions. Director Friend.
Bids?
Also discussed,
Bids on
Oh, is there a number 9?
yeah, I was on number 9, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
Bids on materials and contracts, tab 9, discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from
Okay.
Sherry Meisinger dated January 24th.
Second.
discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Main extensions. Director Friend.
Discussed in committee, I move approval as outlined in the memo from Corey O'Brien dated January 25th.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Wage and/or salary increases and ratifications. Director Begley.
I move that we approve of the wage and/or salary increases and ratifications as discussed in committee this morning and outlined in the memo from Bonnie Savine dated January 20th, 2022.
Second, anybody?
Second.
For discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
SPA salary structure adjustment. Director Begley.
I move that we lay this item over to our March meeting, given our discussion and some, just some more information that I'd like to have and also share with our board my colleagues on the board to make a more informed decision. I don't know if I need to make a motion on that or if it can just be requested to lay over with approval of the board.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
I don't think I even need a motion on that, do I? Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. First legislative report for 2022. Director Cook.
Well, I move we approve the recommendations proposed by Mr. Kubat as presented in the committee meetings and as outlined in the first legislative report for 2022, dated January 26th, with the exception of LB 1046, which will be addressed in a separate motion.
Discussion.
I would like to offer a substitute motion at this time. that we approve the neutral position as recommended by management, with the caveat that our representative in Lincoln, Rick Kubat, has the authority at any time to change that to an opposition should M.U.D. become a party to this bill.
I think we have to deal with the first motion first.
Yeah.
No, you deal with the substitute one first.
All right, and to clarify that substitute motion, I want the bill number in that substitute.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
1046. This only deals with LB 1046, the substitute motion.
Okay, I need a second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion?
Does Tanya need to withdraw her motion first?
Not yet.
We have to do that one first.
It's hard for me to vote on the substitute motion without knowing what the exception you were going to put in your motion.
Probably the same thing.
Pretty much the same thing that I kind of described when I was talking to Mr. Kubat. Would you please help us out here, Mr. Mendenhall?
Mark Mendenhall, Senior Vice President, General Counsel. So the substitute motion, as I understand it, is to recommend a certain position on LB 1046. It's got a second. Now we're just discussing. And so this is, I think, the opportunity for Director Cook to express what she would have recommended in terms of a position for 1046. And so we'll address that with a vote, and then we can come back to the remainder of the letter.
Would it be easier?
My motion.
Yes.
Would it be easier if Tim amended the motion instead of offering a substitute, just for logistical? And I agree, I seconded Tim's motion, but just to make things easier.
You can't have two motions out there with seconds. You got to deal with the first one.
Yeah, so I think we're dealing with.
The first one or the second?
We're dealing with the substitute motion.
That's right.
And that is only for the position on LB 1046.
Right.
Up or down? Yes.
Right.
Go back to the original.
So I think you're still in discussion.
We're still in discussion.
And then you call a roll call for that.
And what I need some clarification on, and this may be also a point of order, so point of order, so Mr. Mendenhall don't get comfortable. We still need this motion that I made, so I like your, not so much a substitute motion, but like that language for an amendment to the motion, because we do want to approve everything except LB 1046, and then we want to come back with your points in a separate motion, maybe not a substitute motion.
So your motion is for everything except 1046. So we should
Correct.
vote on that?
Yes.
Comfortable?
Okay, well then, I would say that, just to be clear, to withdraw the substitute motion, will take us.
I will withdraw the substitute motion.
Okay, and then we're back to.
Don't we have to withdraw the second on Tim's substitute?
I'll withdraw Tim's second on the substitute motion. We're unraveling. I set the tone for confusion this whole meeting, so I may as well have to undo my second.
And now the motion before the board would be Director Cook's motion to
Yes.
approve the
Should I read it
letter.
again? Correct.
Yes.
I'm going to read it again just to kind of refresh our memories here. I move we approve the recommendations proposed by Mr. Kubat as presented in the committee meetings and as outlined in the first legislative report for 2022, dated January 26th, with the exception of LB 1046, which will be addressed in a separate motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Good. Now what do we need, a roll call?
Discussion, roll call.
Okay, discussion?
Can we have your second again?
Yes, I second the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Okay, now where are we?
I would like to introduce a motion that we accept management's recommendation for a neutral position on LB 1046 with the caveat that our representative in the legislature, Rick Kubat, has our authority to alter this to opposition at any time should M.U.D. become a party to this bill.
Second.
Second. Who seconded it?
Who's the second?
Discussion. Roll call.
I have a couple comments.
Okay.
I will vote against that resolution because I think we ought to be taking a position right now to be in opposition of that bill.
More discussion?
I understand that, and nobody in here is for it, but hearkening back to some of my memories of of that environment, there's some nuances that I'm going to trust Mr. Kubat to navigate on our behalf. So I certainly understand that, and nobody runs because they like to come to meetings. I don't particularly like to come to meetings, and I understand that. And it's kind of like I just told our friend in Kansas City, I'm sticking with the strategy. I'm freaked out about the reports on the stock market, but I'm going to stick with the strategy. And the strategy that I talked about before was at the nanosecond, we're included, we strike with force and reinforce our negative neutral stance.
And I would agree with Senator Cook. I mean, both of us have been through I'm sorry. I need a bell. I would agree with Senator Cook. Both of us have been through the battles. Both of us have seen some sneaky techniques. Rick is an expert, and I trust his judgment. I think one of the keys here is going to be keeping us informed moment by moment. When something happens, that bill gets out of committee, we're all informed. The next step, we know as much as Rick does as it goes on. So I'm comfortable with that, the way that Tanya's proposing it.
Any more discussion? Then I'm roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
No.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Okay. Renewal of financial services agreement with Piper Sandler and Company. Director
McGowan. As discussed in committee and outlined in a memo from Joe Schaffer dated 1/25/22, I move to approve the renewal of the financial services agreement with Piper Sandler and Company.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Proposal to authorize gas system revenue bond series 2022. Director McGowan.
I move to approve the proposed and authorize the gas system revenue bonds and the bond resolution as discussed in committee and outlined in the memo from Joe Schaffer dated January 25th, 2022.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Other matters of district business for discussion. Do any board members have any further comments?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to invite M.U.D employees and anybody listening to partake in the Heat the Streets Run and Walk for Warmth. It's on Saturday, March 5th, and it's at Exarban Village. It starts at 9 o'clock. It's a 5K run or a 1-mile walk. My wife Rebecca and I are co-chairs along with Craig and Emily M.U.D from the OPPD board. And registration runs through that day, I believe, or it might end on, if you go to the website, it provides you with all the information. And the Walk and Run for Warmth has been sponsored by the district going back to 2007 along with OPPD. And the proceeds benefit local utility assistance programs to help friends, family, neighbors in our communities to help pay their utility bills. And it's a worthwhile event. It's always a lot of fun. I know Tanya and Gwen have been co-chairs in the past, as have I, so it's a worthwhile event, and I know the district has gotten behind it for many, many years, and I encourage you to register and get out and walk and run for a good cause.
And we predict warm weather for that day.
Yeah.
Any more comments?
Director Frost or Chairman Frost, I'd just like to tell my colleagues I will not be here for the March meeting. I'll be out of town and cannot participate remotely.
Okay.
Just to let you know.
Anybody else?
I have to remind my colleagues to wear green for the March meeting. It seems like I'm always in this position where my colleagues seem to forget, so I'm giving you fair notice now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Turn green.
Thanks for the reminder, Tim.
Okay.
He's talking to me, by the way, because I forgot to wear green. Yes, he is. I forgot to wear
else?
green last year, so point well taken.
Anything else? Okay. Due to COVID-related precautions, members of the public have access to the meeting via WebEx connection that is set up in a conference room adjacent to the boardroom at the headquarters building. Are there any members of the board who would like to address the board? If so, I would ask the moderator to please escort them to the boardroom so that they may do so in person.
Chairman Frost, no public in attendance at this time. Thank you.
Closed session. We will now go into closed session for the purpose of discussing litigation, real estate, and personnel matters.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, okay, discussion? Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes?
Howard? Yes. Kavanaugh?
Yes.
long as he says we're up.
He's ready.
Oh, then, don't let me keep it away.
He's ready when you're ready.
Okay.
1 second.
Oh,
You ready?
He just said 1 second.
Okay. Do we have a motion to return to open session?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes?
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Does anyone have any comments they would like to share? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes?
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Time 11:45 a.m.